Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Chapter 3 of our Science, Technology, and Society course. In this lesson, we'll explore how science and technology have helped shape our country and how they continue to play a big role in building our nation. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to do three important things. Explain how early Filipinos used science in their daily lives or everyday lives. So we looked at how our ancestors used basic science like farming methods, building homes, and making tools to survive and improve their way of life. Second, present government policies on science and technology and explain why they matter. Third, discuss the role of science and technology in nation building. So we will understand how science and technology help make our country stronger, smarter, and more prepared for the future. Without further ado, let's begin with the introduction. Science and technology in the Philippines have come a long way, from ancient practices to modern innovations. Filipinos have always found ways to solve problems and improve life through creative thinking and practical skills. In short, our people have been using science and technology for many years, whether it's farming, medicine, or building tools. We've actually made some great progress. Many important inventions and discoveries have been made by Filipinos or are credited to Filipino minds. These achievements show that we are capable of contributing to global knowledge and innovation. This means that Filipinos are smart and talented. We created things that help not just our country, but the whole world. In this chapter, we'll explore how science and technology affect the development of the Philippines as a nation. We will also see how they help us grow economically, socially, and even culturally. And so let's begin by understanding how science and technology are not just tools. They are actually part of our identity and our journey as a nation. To understand how science and technology help our nation, we will look at three important time periods in Philippine history. First, pre-colonial period. This was the time before the Spanish came. Early Filipinos already used science in farming, fishing, building houses, and making tools. Their knowledge came from experience and observation. Second, colonial period. This was during the time of Spanish, American, and Japanese rule. Foreign powers introduced new technologies, schools, and systems, but they also controlled how science was used. Third, post-colonial period. This is after we gained independence. Filipinos started creating their own policies and programs to support science and technology for national development. In the next slides, we'll explore each period in more detail so we can see how science and technology evolved and how they have helped shape our country's growth. So pre-colonial period. Okay, this is actually the early Filipino ingenuity. Long before the Spaniards arrived, early Filipinos were already practicing science and technology in their daily lives. Their knowledge came from experience, observation, and tradition. This means that even without formal schools or modern tools, our ancestors were smart. They learned by doing and passed their knowledge from one generation to the next. So let's look at three key areas. We have medicine. Early Filipinos used plants and herbs to treat illnesses. So they knew which leaves or roots could help with fever, wounds, or stomach pain. In the next one, we have agriculture and animal raising. They had systems for planting crops and raising animals. So, in simple terms, they knew when to plant rice, how to take care of chickens or pigs, and how to store food. And the last one, we have transportation. They developed ways to travel by land and sea. Okay, and moreover, they built boats for fishing and trade, and they have also used animals or walked to move around. These practices show that early Filipinos were resourceful and scientific in their own way. Their skills lay the foundation of modern technologies. Okay, so let's continue with the pre-colonial period. So we will talk about the rice terraces of the Cordilleras. One of the most impressive engineering achievements in Philippine history was built by hand long before modern machines existed. The natives of the Cordilleras created the rice terraces carved into the mountainsides. This means that our ancestors shaped the mountains so they could grow rice even in cold and steep places. So we have key points to highlight in this um, development. We have these rice terraces allowed people to grow crops in high and cold areas. They also built an irrigation system that brings water from forest and mountain tops. The system is so well designed that it looks or it still works today. So the system is so well designed that it still works today. So in other words, they made a smart way to bring water to their farms. And even now, their farming system is still working. This only shows how early Filipinos were not just survivors, they were also innovators. They used science and engineering to adapt to their environment and feed their communities. Now, let us tackle about the colonial period or the Spanish contributions. When the Spaniards colonized the Philippines, they introduced new tools, systems, and ways of building. This marked a major shift in how science and technology were used in our country. Now let us look at some of the key contributions during the colonial period. First one is infrastructure. The Spanish or the Spaniards brought modern construction techniques. So they helped build strong walls, roads, bridges, and churches using stone and tools that were new to Filipinos. Second is we have the health systems. The Spanish government introduced organized health services. So, for example, they started hospitals and health programs, but most for the rich, okay, but mostly for the rich and powerful. So, mga rich lang and mga powerful people lang ang maka-afford sa ilahang hospitals and health programs. Then we have the third one, education systems. Schools were built and formal education began. They taught reading, writing, and religion, but mainly to the principalia or elite class. So katong gihapon na ay may kaya na maka-afford og education. These changes helped shape the Philippines, but they also came with limits. Science and technology were used to build, but access was not equal. Still, this period laid the groundwork for future development. And now, how about the American contributions to science and education during the colonial period? When the Americans came, they brought major changes to the Philippines, especially in science, technology, and education. Their goal was to modernize many parts of Filipino life. So the first contribution they have is the government support for science. So Americans created the Bureau of Science, which is a government agency focused on developing science and technology. In other words, the Americans built an office just for science to help improve farming, health, and other areas. The second one is about the focus and areas of scientific development or focus areas of scientific development. Science during this time focused on agriculture, food processing, medicine, and pharmacy. So, in other words, they studied how to grow better crops, make safer food, and improve health and medicine. The third contribution of the Americans is the public education system. Americans built schools and made education available to more people. So they opened schools for everyone and not just for the rich. So mapobre man ka, madato ka, you can go to school during the American period, no? So more Filipinos learned writing, reading, and of course science. The fourth contribution is improved engineering and health services. So we have roads, buildings, and hospitals were improved. So, in other words, life became more modern. People had better roads, cleaner water, and more access to doctors. This period helped Filipinos gain access to modern science and education. It was a turning point that prepared the country for future growth and independence. So now we will discuss about the post-colonial period. And this is where we are starting to build our own path as Filipinos. After gaining independence, the Philippines began to take charge of its own development. Different presidents and administrations created programs to support science and technology. This means that after the colonizers left, our leaders made their own plans to help science grow in the country. So we have to remember some of the ideas no, during this period. Each administration had its own science and technology agenda. Some presidents made bigger improvements than others, and the focus was on using science to solve national problems and improve people's lives. So, in other words, some leaders helped science grow faster, while others did less, but all tried to use science to help the country. So, this period shows how science and technology became part of our national goals. It was no longer just about copying foreign ideas, but it was about creating our own solutions for Filipino needs. Now let's talk about the Marcos administration and science infrastructure. One of the Filipino presidents who made major contributions to science and technology in the Philippines was former President Ferdinand Marcos. During his administration, several specialized institutions were built to support health and scientific research. So here are some of the developments during Marcos' administration. The creation and strengthening of agencies. Marcos established and reinforced government agencies focused on science and technology. In other words, he built offices and programs to help science grow in the country. Second, medical and research institutions. So we have important hospitals and research centers were built, and this includes National Kidney and Transplant Institute, Philippine Heart Center, Lung Center of the Philippines. So remember that these centers help Filipinos get better treatment and allow doctors to study diseases more deeply. These institutions show how science and technology were used to improve public health and research. They remain part of our national infrastructure today, continuing to serve the Filipino people. So this is now our last slide. So building institutions for the future. After independence, the Philippines didn't just continue science and technology programs, it built institutions that would guide our progress for generations. So, let us highlight some of the developments during this period. We have Pag-asa. Pag-asa replaced the old Weather Bureau to provide an accurate weather forecasting and disaster preparedness. Pag-asa help us know the weather and prepare for storms. Then we also have National Academy of Science and Technology. So this was created to recognize and support Filipino scientists. So in other words, NAST honors or National Academy of Science and Technology honors smart Filipino researchers and helps science grow in our country. And we have DOST or Department of Science and Technology. Originally the National Science and Development Board, it became the DOST, a key agency for science and innovation. So DOST is the main office that supports science projects, research, and inventions in the Philippines. President Marcos emphasized that science and technology were essential for nation building. Even after his term, the institutions he helped strengthen continued to grow. Okay, the institution he helped strengthen continued to grow and serve the Filipino people. These agencies are part of our national legacy. They remind us that science and technology are not just tools, they are part of our identity, our resilience, and our future.